All right, here we go. Welcome to Storycomic Presents, where we interview amazing storytellers and artists. This is episode 35. We are honored to have with us Tony McMillen. He's the creator behind the heavy metal horror novel An Augmented Fourth, published by Word Horde, the sci-fi fantasy graphic novel Lumen, and now Serious Creatures, his comic book series about a teenage special effects artist working in Hollywood. And he has now Kickstarter now is combining the first story arc into a trade paperback, and he's going to talk to us a little bit about that. But first, Tony, welcome. It's super happy to talk to you. You got great stuff. You got as we showed earlier, I got some pages already ready to show the audience, and also we'll talk to the listeners about some of your books, and we have some great questions that I just want to show you ahead of time. These are all my questions I'm going to ask you. So
right on. Cool.
So for some of the folks that might not be familiar with your work or might not be familiar with your books and your comic books and your music and all that fun. So do you want to first kind of give people a quick background on how you got into this massive creative atmosphere that you created for yourself?
Hey, thank you very much. Yeah, totally. So I think the first thing I kind of did that people might have seen was a novel called Nefarious Twit. And Nefarious Twit was a prose novel with some illustrations, and it was basically about a famous children's book author who was estranged from his family, and then when his son grows up, his son tries to find him and murder him. So it's this really dark take on Shel Silverstein and kids' books. And I did that. I self-published it, and it did okay. And actually, since I did the cover art, I got a few gigs doing the cover art for other people's novels. And one was called Pig Iron by David James Keaton, which is a really great weird Western. I really enjoyed that. And after doing that, I've always loved comic books, and I was like, I need to try doing a comic book. And so the first thing I did was in a comic book is I wrote a book called Oblivion Suite with the artist Catalina Ruffin. And Catalina drew it, and it was a really fun prog rock kind of Pink Floyd love letter. And after doing that, I was like, that was great, but I really want to draw it now. And so I did a graphic novel. I did a 4-issue series. It became a graphic novel called Lumen. And I'm going to return to Lumen. Lumen is sort of it's about a world of endless night. And there's a hero who's a young kid who has a special suit and a lantern, and he's fighting these mushroom monsters. And it's almost like a H.R. Giger with a bit of Adventure Time. It's a really weird mashup, but I think it works. And after doing that, I got a lot of people really enjoyed it and thought that my artwork and my storytelling was kind of a fresh breath of air. And so I was kind of after doing that, I got a lot of confidence, and so I followed up with a novel, Augmented Fourth, which is my heavy metal horror novel from Word Horde, and then that led me to Serious Creatures, which is my current project. And I've written and drawn Serious Creatures and done the lettering and the coloring. It's all me. So if you love it, that's me, and if you hate it, that's also my fault. But which is a good feeling overall. I have no one else to blame. But this is so far, I think this is the best thing I've done, and it's I'm really proud of the work, and I'm really happy that so far people have dug it.
Yeah. And so you started off, as you said, as you wanting to be a writer, but I remember you said in a previous interview once that you wanted to do filmmaking. You wanted to be a director, right?
Yeah, that was as a kid, especially, I really wanted to be a director. And I think what happened is I slowly, I'd write screenplays, and a lot of the first things I ever really wrote were screenplays. And eventually kind of dawned on me that I still love film, but it's really hard to have a singular voice in film. So even auteur directors, you have Tarantino or Spielberg or anybody, even though you can tell that's one of their movies, they have a bunch of actors, cinematography. They have a bunch of people who help them make these films. So no one makes it by themselves. And that's good and bad. And for me, I was like, well, it's really for a comic book or a novel, it's a lot easier to get as much of my voice into the work without any other filters. And part of that is like, I think, especially when you're doing things on your own, it's hard to find collaborators who are as passionate as you are. And I think sometimes also simply you want your way, and that, sometimes that's not good. Sometimes you probably could, I've worked with editors have talked me off cliffs, and it's been great. But sometimes it's really nice and refreshing to just do it the way you wanted to do it, for better or for worse. And comic books especially have really allowed me to do that.
So let me ask you this, because as you had that passion of wanting to kind of, originally as you were first starting out as this creative endeavor, as we mentioned, that you wanted to maybe do filmmaking, but then you went into writing, and we'll show some of your art in a bit, then you decided to draw it yourself. So let me ask you this question. How did you, not skill wise, how did you start drawing, but how did you start drawing it? Was it based off of a writer's eye, by how you imagine the books, because as you write, you kind of have to see it in your head as you write? Or did you do it based off of, from like a director's eye, with like storyboarding, as it works? Because basically, sequential art, which is comic books, but also storyboarding. How did you think you started those visualizations when you started making these comics?
I think what it took was, I've always loved comic books, and but it was only like the last 10 years I start really realizing what makes a comic book different than a novel, and different than just the storyboards for a film. Like what can a comic do that other mediums can't do? And so I look at something like Watchmen, and I compare it to like the film Watchmen, and not just the changes they made in the story, but I was like, well, when you tell it this certain way, in the comic book, it's more effective. And it's like, well, because the story was written to be a comic. And I start realizing, well, in a lot of art, sometimes the most effective art is when they really exploit the medium they're in. And so I start thinking about comic books again, and going, well, if I'm going to make a comic book, it can't just be a novel of mine, like an idea I had for a novel, then I'll switch it and turn it into a comic. It has to come, this idea will be best served as a comic book. The best way to tell it, the most compelling way, the most interesting way, is in the form of comics. And so once I kind of figure that out, I've always drawn. I never really stopped drawing, but then I start really trying to draw sequential storytelling, and start trying to draw comics. And I thought my style, I'm still growing and still getting better, but I reached a point where I was like, well, I think this is effective as far as I'm telling a story with these panels, and my style is interesting enough that I feel like I could share this with somebody, and they'll understand the story, and maybe they'll kind of they'll enjoy the way I'm telling it. And so that was with Lumen. I was like, I'm reaching a point in my style where I think I'm doing something that's a little, there's enough flavor that's just me. That's not, I'm not aping so many people that you can tell I'm just, a ripoff artist. I was like, I think this is worth showing people. And so Lumen is going to be, I think originally I was just going to do like 10 pages as an experiment. And then I did the first 10 pages. I was like, oh, I'm just going to keep going. This is so much fun. And all of a sudden it just kind of snowballed. And then I was like, well, I think I should do 4 issues of this. And in those 4 issues, they actually got extra long, and it's like 6 issues of material. And that's kind of how Lumen came to be. And the first issue's online for free, and you can kind of check it out. And this is the first time I drew an interior of a comic book, and I felt like I could really show somebody. And ever since then, it started, like, my brain kind of, like, I started understanding, like, comic books can do this thing. And so if I want my story to be told this way, then comics is the best way to do that.
They had, you mentioned also, I said, it might have been in your, so anybody listening, please subscribe to Tony's YouTube channel as well. So that's, I've watching some of your videos on there. I think it was one of those videos where you actually said, make your story fit the medium.
Yeah. And I stand by that. I learned it the hard way. My first novel, Nefarious Twit, you mentioned I want to be a filmmaker. Well, the first few drafts of that, they weren't screenplays, but they basically wanted to be screenplays. And so I kept visualizing it as a film. I even had like musical cues, and I think the work, it's kind of suffered from that. And eventually I got it to a point after 6 years of writing it that I think it was a novel, and it had a voice, but I still think that's the one thing I've done that I don't mind George Lucasing and going back and fixing it. And just because it's still kind of I still sniff the whiff of like it wants to be a movie, and that's not what it should be. And so by the time I did the second novel, Augmented Fourth, that's when it hit me. I was like, oh, this is what novels do, and then that was the same time I was figuring out, well, this is what comic books can do. And it's really a simple thing, but it unlocked everything for me. I was like, oh, this is why this story should be this, and this is why that story should be that.
Did you ever look at it from, as you mentioned there, have you ever gone something halfway through, and would you be able to say, because you see these things happening all the time where like they make a screenplay version of a book, or they make a book adaptation of a movie. Have you ever thought about what it would look like if you took Lumen and made it into a novelization version of it, or what would you lose on that, or a novelization version of Serious Creatures?
Yeah, and actually, in fact, Serious Creatures started 10 or 12 years ago. I wrote a short story, which is the bare bones of Serious Creatures. It was called A Malfunctioning Werewolf, and it was essentially it's kind of what issue 5 of Serious Creatures tackles, but it's about a young guy on a set who's a special effects artist, and he's trying to make a werewolf effect work, and he's in over his head. And so I wrote this really long, like 50-page short story, and it was okay. I liked the idea of it. I just didn't know what to do with it. And so 12 years later or so, I started thinking about the story more and more. I was like, oh, I should make this a full-fledged novel. And so, but I kept thinking it'd be really interesting to tell the story with visuals, because I could also open up a more surreal way of telling the story. I could do weird asides. I could kind of play around with things and be a little postmodern. It'd be a little easier to do that in a comic book form. And so I was like, okay, well, what I'll do is I'll write a chapter as a novel, and I'll see how that goes. And if I love it, then I'll just keep going. If I'm not sure, then I'll try to do a couple pages of comic. So I wrote a chapter as a novel, and then I made the first 5 pages of Serious Creatures. And I like by page 2, I was like, this feels way better as a comic. This is starting to sing. This is starting to feel like, oh, it's just flowing. And that's when I knew. And I've and then vice versa. I have seen I've read comic books that I think are kind of like movie pitches. I'm like, this seems more like they just want to they want to tell this story. They don't have the money for the movie, and they want to maybe entice people. It feels a little bit like that. And I've read some novels where I feel like they are also trying to be movie screenplays.
Mm.
I feel like they're not really warming up to what the great advantages of a novel are. And so I think I'm really happy that I kind of figured it out for myself. And so there's always a question when I'm thinking of a new idea. I'm like, what's the best way to tell this? And I like to think I've made the right choices so far, but we don't know.
You mentioned, and I'm gonna share the screen real quick and look at least one of your issues of, I think this is Lumen's here.
Yeah.
Your work itself, and I think this is one point, and I know that maybe this is something with, I don't know if this is what you bring to the table as a musician or bring to the table as a writer, but there is a design quality to every page. Every page you have actually looks like a singular piece of art as well, of like,
thank you.
Well, laid out graphic design. So let me ask you this: you wear the hat of a writer and an artist, do you have any stories that you're trying to tell that doesn't fit your art style?
Yeah, and actually that's something that I've recently kind of thought about. Like when I did Oblivion Suite with Catalina, I I really like Catalina's art, and so I try to write it to their strengths. And I've read before that that's what most of the best writers in comics do. They'll like Alan Moore, I've heard, will call or write someone and go, hey, so what do you like to draw and what do you not like to draw? And it'll be really like nitty gritty. Like, do you not like drawing motorcycles? Do you hate drawing dinner parties? Like, and what do you enjoy, like drawing blimps or capes, like whatever it is? And if he doesn't like tailor the whole story to them, he'll play to their strengths, and those stories usually work better. And you can look at his stuff where Swamp Thing with Steve Bissette and John Tolbin, it's kind of their style is really good for kind of gnarly, organic, messy stuff. But then Dave Gibbons is a lot more clean and sort of precise, and that's what Watchmen kind of needs. It needs like a Stanley Kubrick kind of coldness. And I took that to heart, and so I wrote Oblivion Suite to Catalina's strengths, I thought, and I don't think I could do that story with my style. And yeah, recently I've thought about, like, there are certain things where in my mind I could see somebody else's style that I just don't have. Like I think my style, at least right now, is sort of messy and organic, and it's very I don't know how to say it. I think my style it's not a clean, it's not a clean, precise style. It's not a cutesy style, but I think that I can do humor and I can do warm things. But I think I know how I draw and how I like to draw. So the stories so far have kind of naturally fit that. And Lumen, especially, Lumen was visual before it was really a story in a lot of ways. But Serious Creatures was a real stretch. Serious Creatures is more me going, how far can I take this style? Can I take this really abstract style of mine into the real world? Can I make it can I draw like a bus station and still have it like be interesting in the way I like things to look, but also people don't think it's like some weird fantasy dreamscape all the time. And so I think I've met that, but this has been a real challenge in a lot of ways.
With what you said, that when you decided to make Serious Creatures as a comic book, and earlier you kind of infer that if you're doing a director, you'd kind of have to do more collaboration. Did you decide that I don't want to share this particular story, or with Lumen, I don't want to share this with having to talk to somebody about how this goes. I just want to do it myself. Was there a level of sanctity or holding it close to the vest that I don't see anyone else creating these images other than myself?
I think Lumen, especially, since it was my first comic done all by myself, I was basically the story came out of me going, I think with my style I could pull this kind of story off. So that one I couldn't imagine anyone else doing it, because I was trying something to me that was very, very different and new. I was kind of finding out my voice with comic books. Serious Creatures, I never considered anyone else drawing it per se, but I was like, well, for this story, I got to change my style a little bit from what Lumen was, because Lumen's so fantasy, and so there's nothing normal, and it's very dreamlike. So Serious Creatures, I was like, well, I want to tell this story it takes place during the 70s and 80s, and it's in the real world, but there are some fantastic elements. And I was like, well, one of the things I want to do differently with this is, like, I want the color to look different. And I'm a big fan of Michel Fiffe, who does Copra. He's been doing Copra for maybe 8 years now, and also a big fan of Tom Scioli, who recently did the Jack Kirby bio comic just called Kirby the King of Comics, and he did Transformers versus G.I. Joe. And what those two guys have in common that I really have gleaned from them is they color with crayon, and Tom Scioli does digital, but it looks kind of like crayon and sometimes watercolor. And I really enjoyed how soft that looked. And my drawing style is different than both of theirs, and I thought, well, would it work? Because my drawing style is kind of rough and there's a lot of shadow and it's kind of dark, but would it be offset with the watercolor? Would that kind of make it interesting, the juxtaposition of that? And I did it, and the first 5 pages of Serious Creatures, initially I colored them kind of the way I colored Lumen, and I just wasn't happy with it. And then I tried this softer approach of using digital crayon, digital watercolor, and a few other tricks. And all of a sudden I was like, no, this feels right. This feels like more like how a memory feels, where things, sometimes some colors are brighter, some are dimmer, but it's a little more subdued and dreamy, and it just feels a little softer. And I thought it really worked with my art style. And so all of a sudden that was like this, I did the first 5 pages like that. I was like, this is going to work. I think this style, this is the approach to go. And I in the thinking about my new projects, a lot of them I think my style is the way to go, and I can change my style and grow in certain ways. But there's sometimes I'm like, it would be great if I had an artist who I had specific people. I'm like, oh, that would be great to get this guy. Or I'd be like, it'd be cool if I could discover somebody who is more in this vein, but I haven't yet bit the bullet and approached them, because like if I did that, if I collaborated, I would want it to be a real collaboration, because I think that's the value of a collaboration. I don't want to call the shots and pay someone to do just do work that I dictate everything, because I think they're not going to enjoy that. And I also think I could gain more if I look to them as on equal footing. If and so I haven't thought of the project yet that will do that, but there's definitely stuff. There's stuff that, like, for instance, I love Frank Miller's work, but I'm really glad that Dave Mazzucchelli drew Year One. I think Year One really looks better in his kind of Alex Tothian sort of style. And when Frank Miller did Hard Boiled, Jeff Darrow, I can't imagine anyone else doing that book. That book's basically is I'm there for Jeff Darrow's art and Frank Miller just to kind of hold my hand a little bit through it. So, but at the same time, I love, like, Frank Miller, him drawing Dark Knight or him doing Sin City or Daredevil or whatever. It's I think the best work, it's really hard to imagine someone else doing it. And I'm hoping that I can if you like Serious Creatures, you like Lumen, you can't imagine someone else doing it. Even if they're more polished in certain ways, this has my actual literal thumbprints in a lot of the art. If you look closely, I just smush my thumb with ink into, like, certain parts to make a kind of texture. So it's all me.
Well, let me ask you that then. Talk to us about how you create these pages. Is it pen and ink? Is it all digital? Or because the style itself, as we're saying, it's also reminiscent of, as you say, like the 70s. It actually looks like what the setting is.
Thanks.
Yeah, talk to us about, let's, like, pulling up one of these covers. Talk to us about how you designed them, from start to finish.
Yeah, definitely. So I still draw on paper. I draw on Bristol board. I draw on vellum Bristol board. Has a little bit of a tooth to it. I draw with ink, and I use a Pilot Parallel pen as my secret weapon. I love this thing. Pilot Parallel pen, if you don't know about it, it's a chisel tip, so it's flat. And so it's what's really interesting about it is you can use that flat tip to get these big fat lines, and over, like, vellum paper or any paper, it creates really interesting textures, and you can do that. But then you can also use the tip of it to do fine lines. And so I used to use Hunt 102s, and I use a brush, and I had a Pentel pen sometimes. And what I found was, like, I using a bunch of different tools. The good news is, like, okay, so you're going to switch tools, gives you time to stop for a second, reflect on what you're drawing, and think about what your next approach is. But at the same time, that cuts down on the flow. You have to stop and kind of rejigger things in your head. The Pilot Parallel pen so far is kind of my one tool, and so the only time I stop is when it runs out of ink and I just got to put in a new cartridge. And I really kind of fell in love with that flow. And so it's sort of like film directors, where they talk about with the new digital cameras when they're making a film. What's great is you don't have to cut, you don't have to reload the camera, you just keep on going. The flip side is, of course, directors, it's kind of nice to cut sometimes and go, well, we gotta move this around. The lights aren't right. Let me think of the scene. So there are pluses and minuses, but the Pilot Parallel pen really opened things up for me. And so when I start drawing with it, I start realizing that I really liked going side to side. It kind of created this effect. It almost looked like when you print something out on an old fashioned printer, and it's all printed side to side. And I was like, that's kind of a neat thing. And I started doing really abstract kind of silhouette figures like that. And that sort of started leading me towards like what Lumen became. I started drawing like Batman and things I knew, like the shapes, and I started drawing with this style. I was like, that's interesting. I don't know if anyone's exactly doing that. And I started doing things where I want to have a holding line on an arm or a leg or a whole figure sometimes. And I was like, everything looks like it's in motion. Everything looks like it's almost made out of mist. And I was like, and Lumen with the test was like, okay, so can I make this actually work in sequential storytelling, or does it look too weird? And I think it worked. And so that's how I draw. And I I do a pencil for the initial page layout, and
Okay.
I do pretty loose pencil. I like to use a blue pencil, and I don't erase. I just use the blue. I just take the blue out with the computer. But the coloring, I would love to say I actually do real watercolors, real crayon, real oil, but I'm not good enough. I always make mistakes, and so I've gone digital. But I've tried and especially with serious creatures, I've tried to make it look as like, organic as possible. And so using like these softer brushes and these crayon brushes and these watercolor brushes, I think it really evokes old-fashioned stuff. And one of my biggest influences on the color of serious creatures, besides Michel Fiffe and Tom Scioli, is the famous Munsters horror artist Basil Gogos.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
Basil Gogos, his big thing, which I thought was just so impressive, is that he's these monster covers, which they're like, I call them an oil slick rainbow. There's every color in the world, and it somehow works. It shouldn't work. All these colors kind of mashed together, and I was like, okay, so I need to figure out if I can do that within the pages of the story and what that would mean. And so I've used it now. So on the covers, some of the covers of serious creatures are just done in that style because they look great, I think, and they kind of evoke famous monsters. Within the story, though, it's sort of like it tells the reader that Bobby's having some sort of emotional experience and that the world is reflecting his internal world.
Right.
And so it becomes this sort of like trigger for the reader to go, oh, something's happening to Bobby. Is he afraid? Is he thinking about his ambition? And it became a really fun vehicle for that. And so Basil Gogos is somebody I think the first time I saw his art and I realized who he was, he did a Rob Zombie album cover, and I went back and realized Famous Monsters was an incredible like magazine, and I saw these covers and I started realizing I thought it was a house style, and it's actually mostly it was just him.
Oh wow. Okay.
And I was so taken by that. And so the issue, the cover of issue 1 is actually a direct homage to his cover for Famous Monsters, which has a Werewolves of London cover, and not American Werewolf, but the old fashioned Werewolves of London. So I think it's on the very top.
Oh, I saw it was the one down here. No, I
Oh,
thought
you're. I
this
think.
one, right?
Oh, that's actually that's just a weird movie poster that's within the universe, but
Okay.
it's like the main Kickstarter image with the rainbow kind of face on Bobby's
Oh, right.
image. But that was the first one I did with the color scheme. I was like, oh, I love this. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
the one. I was like, this. I think this works, and it's really hard to pull off too, because you just do too much of one color, and all of a sudden it just looks like a mess. But I think if you do it just right, it's this Technicolor like nightmare. I love that.
Yeah. So you draw them out, and then you kind of like you said, you just kind of sketch it out. Then you use your pilot
Yep.
and then do you then scan it in? And what program do you use for
Yeah.
digital?
So I scan it in, and then I use Photoshop to because I draw on 11 by 17 pages. I use Photoshop
Okay.
to merge the pages, and it does it seamlessly. Usually, once in a while, I have to kind of mess with things. And once the pages are merged together into one complete page, I get rid of the blue line pencil, and then I use I use Photoshop for the first issue of Serious Creatures, and then I saw that I'm gonna name him again, Tom Scioli, the guy who does Transformers versus GI Joe, and now the Jack Kirby book. I thought his work was all practical. I thought he just used analog crayons and markers. He uses Procreate on the iPad, and
Okay. Yeah.
yeah, I saw him do a video, and so I sheepishly asked him on Facebook, "Hey Tom, you don't know me, but I'm just wondering, like, do you like the Procreate? And do you use like the new Procreate, the new Apple Pencil?" And he's like, "Oh no," he's like, "I love it, but I just use the old one. It's cheaper and it's just as good." And he's like, "Good luck." And so I bought one. It's a couple years old, and the pencils it's like the first Apple Pencil, and I
Yeah.
use Procreate. And Procreate, it's great. You can get a bunch of brushes. You can get. I use halftone brushes and crayon brushes. And again, what's really great about digital is you can make a bunch of mistakes and just delete them and do over. And that's really helpful for me. And so that's I do that. And then for lettering, which I think this is kind of interesting. I'm still love to hand letter everything, and I love the look of hand lettering. I just haven't been able to get my level, my talent to the level where I think it's acceptable. So what I've done is sort of a compromise where I've made a hand lettered alphabet. I fed that into a computer program, and it created a font based on my hand lettering, and that letters most of the comic. And then occasionally for sound effects or certain words which I want to emphasize, I will hand letter those. And so I think it's sort of it's a nice middle ground between hand lettering and digital lettering, because I think digital lettering usually just kind of doesn't look quite right on a comic page, and especially with my style, like a normal kind of comic font. I just when I've done it before, it just doesn't look right. I need something that's a little more stylized, I think.
And so let me ask you this then: with now that you've been making comics, have you seen that it's actually helped or hindered your ability to write long form like novels now?
I think it's helped, or it hasn't hindered at least. I have completed like a trilogy of prose novels in between. I finished them between Lumen and Serious Creatures, and I had a blast doing that. And I think it's the best writing I've done. I haven't released them yet, but I do know that the next few projects in my mind, besides getting those novels published, are all comic books. So I don't know if I've been like if I've been spoiled and I just want to do comics now, but I think I'll probably do some more prose work. And I've written a few short stories since then. But what it has helped, I think, is I realized that there are different ways to tell stories, and that if something doesn't feel right, if I have a good idea and then I try to write it as a novel, or it hasn't happened yet, but if I try to do it as a comic that doesn't feel right, maybe I should try a different medium. And I think that knowing that there's other possibilities is kind of it's an open door instead of a shut window.
Mm. So talk to us a bit about your writing as well, because we do have, aspiring authors and public listen to this podcast and watch the videos. Talk to us about just your writing process.
Yeah.
Are you a night owl? Are you a lark? You wake up early in the morning? Do you got to have a few cups of coffee? Is it writing it out, outline, type it right away? How do you do that?
I found in the last 10 years has all been about trying to build healthy habits when it comes to writing. And so for me, and I think a lot of people are like this, I think I get the best writing done early in the day, and then sometimes a little bit late at night too. And what I think is, it's not an original idea, but basically you wake up as soon as you can. Obviously you might have to go to work, you might have to take care of your child, you might have to do something, but if as soon as you can do some writing, if you are still a little a little sleepy and a little dreary, you might be less self-conscious and a little less judgmental about whatever you create. And I think that's a good mental state to be in. So I usually, as most days, as long as life allows, I try to write as early as possible. And it's also, what's good about that too, I think, is if you get something done, it builds a little confidence. Like, you're like, oh man, if life goes like, well, you got to do a bunch of stuff now. You know that you had that 1 hour, maybe 2 hours, maybe longer in the morning. You got something done, so you kind of have a little bit of that confidence. Like, well, if the rest of the day takes over my time, I know I did this. And so I think what that does with writing, and this happens with drawing too, it also builds up muscles, and I mean mental muscles. And so it's like exercising or training for a triathlon. If you do something almost every day, or every day if you can, you're gonna get better. You're gonna get better, and you're also gonna get less precious about things. And I learned that the more I write, the more I draw, the less I'm worried about if something's terrible, because I'm like, well, this is not good. It's not what I wanted, but tomorrow I'm going to try again. And I know that I'll try again tomorrow. It won't be, I don't have any anxiety about not, not being able to do it again. It's like, I'll try again. And one of these days it'll get good again. And it seems to. And so that's a good feeling. So I think I try to write every day if I can, and I try to draw every day if I can. And I think early is good. And then if you can, right before you go to bed, I think that's also a good time. And it's also a good time if you're tired of writing, just to think, just to dream up stuff. Because I think you're getting sleepy again. There's something about your mind where I think you're a little more, your associations are a little freer. I think that's worked for me, at least for the last 10 years. I've been being a little disciplined about, like, okay, every day I'm going to try to do this. And so far it's built up, I think, a lot of good muscles.
So we're talking about, as you said, the Nefarious Twit, An Augmented Fourth, Lumen, Serious Creatures. A previous interviewer asked you, there was you dropped in Easter eggs and some of these things and that are cross-pollinated. And so is this, as they say, is this a actual shared universe? Because you do have some things, as like what Mania, like that fictional Eastern European country. Is this is there going to be like some sort of culmination mega novel or mega thing where you're going to have like Avengers Endgame in a way, where you're just going to have something all together at one point? Or
Yeah, basically that the three novels I've written are kind of that. And it's funny, when I wrote them, I was already a little like I like the MCU and stuff like that. I think it sucks that it's taken over the whole movie industry, but I like them. And there's been a kind of a fatigue now for shared universes. But like I was already doing it, and I kind of like doing it, so I'm going to continue to do it, even if everyone's fatigued. So my three novels, which are unpublished, are called the Bleeding Tree Trilogy, and I have a shared universe, but it's actually shared universes. And what I mean is the novel deals with parallel universes, and I kind of like that because I get my cake and get to eat it too. So I've had multiple versions of different characters and stories, but so like Frankie Gideon, for instance, Frankie Gideon is a sort of David Bowie-esque glam rocker who was in Oblivion Suite, and me and Catalina Ruffin created this character, and they appear in Oblivion Suite. Well, they also appear in Augmented Fourth, and Catalina Ruffin has done something else with the character. I don't know if it's been published yet, but they've done their own thing. But what I think is cool is that in Augmented Fourth, that's a different universe's version of that character.
Okay.
So the rules it's kind of malleable. You can forgive certain things if they die in one world, that's fine, because they're going to be alive in a different one. And so the unpublished trilogy kind of explains how this works, and Dare's Mania is at the focal point of all this. And so even Serious Creatures, there's a little bit of a Dare's Manian mention, and Lumen has there's nothing mentioned in Lumen, but in Augmented Fourth, there's sort of a portal that opens up and some creatures that come out, and they're described very similar to the we call them crepusculoids, the fungus monsters from Lumen. So it is one big bed of stories, and this is actually more inspired by Stephen King than Marvel Comics, because as a kid, it really kind of blew me away when I started realizing, oh, some of these like minor characters are the same people from another novel, and he didn't draw attention to it. It was kind of a nice thing, that knowing that if you pick up on it, that's great. It's really enriching. But if you don't, it's not going to ruin the story for you. You don't need to do the homework, and I kind of like that level of commitment for my readers, that they don't have to do anything, but if they do, they're going to really probably get a little extra kick out of that.
So, which gets to us wanting to we'll dive in a couple in a couple seconds with your Kickstarter that's gone live, and you've already reached your goal, and now it's keep going. And one of the things that you have as I couldn't remember offhand. It's a stretch goal, or if it's an added thing about putting in a cartoonist commentary.
Yeah, I'm super excited about that.
So let me ask you this: as a creator, do you feel as though you are kind of giving away the farm, in the sense of where you've put these things in here, almost like just my daughter the other day, looking at those, find the 6 different things that are wrong, and trying to get her away from not turning it over just to see where the 3, 6. So is there a part of you who sees this as added value, or is there a part of you as a creator who's saying, I just want someone to discover it on their own? How is that?
I wrestled with this recently a lot. Leading up to this, I was very much of the mind. I had this romanticized idea, like, oh man, it was way cooler when like creators and writers and directors never told you anything, and you had to figure it out, or you didn't, and they were very mysterious and whatnot. And then I thought about it, I was like, well, the truth is, I love reading anecdotes from creators. I love hearing the history. I'll watch any documentary about the making of Jaws, even though I've seen 8 of them at this point. I'll continue. I love those things. And I thought about it with this particular story, Serious Creatures. So much of it is about Hollywood history, and there's so many analogs and references and hidden things that, unlike a lot of other stories, there's a lot of little hidden Easter eggs. And I think that if you wanted a little bit of a guided tour, and it's up to you, I will provide that. And I think that some of, like Lumen, for instance, is Lumen doesn't really necessitate that exactly, and so this one is like something kind of special. And if I'm going to try it, I'm going to do it, and if I realize it was a mistake, I'll never do it again. Right? But so far, it's been really fun. I've been creating it, and it's been kind of a gas to go over things, and every once in a while I'll go, oh, I forgot that was a reference I made, and I was like, oh, I forgot all about that. And there's weird things too, like some are obvious, like the movie at the beginning of the story where Bobby he wanders onto a movie set. It's called Finn, and it's a very thinly veiled version of Jaws. That's an obvious thing, but I'll talk about that in the cartoonist commentary. But some things, there's like certain panels, I'm like, well, this is actually homage to Jim Lee's X-Men 241, which, and I kind of like, oh yeah, that's right. I'm not even a big Jim Lee guy, but I was like, I like that pose, and it made sense, and I kind of forgot I did that. So it was a lot of little things like that, which I think are especially fun.
Yeah. So let's talk about your Kickstarter. This is exciting. So this is, you're basically taking your first 6 issues of Serious Creatures, putting it into now basically a trade paperback.
Right.
This is the first arc, and I know that you're talking about there's going to be a second half that you're working on now as well, correct?
Right.
So let's pull up. Let's let's kind of narrate a bit what you have here. You have you've already gone. You might look like probably by the end this is over, you're going to double your pledged goal.
I don't want to jinx it, but I think so. Yeah.
Yeah. And I was asking some the other time. Is there any is there any like superstitions when it comes to like goal reaching or anything with Kickstarters?
Yeah. It's like I don't want to be like, overconfident because I think life will destroy you if you are. But yeah.
So talk to us a bit about your pledge levels and everything as well.
What I think is cool is like even the lowest levels, which are $5 and $10, I think you're gonna get your money's worth. And so like the $5 level, the first one is you get a digital download of my art book Bounce House. And so this is something I did I think 3 years ago, and it sold out. And it's my me drawing a bunch of different pop culture figures, which I think are really fun and interesting. So like the cover is Teen Wolf. You have Teen Wolf, you have like X-Men, you have RoboCop. It runs the gamut. There's a lot of Batman because I love drawing Batman. There's a lot of stuff that I think is my style. It might look fresh to you if you haven't seen it before. I do one of my favorite pictures I've ever drawn is the Bride of Frankenstein, and I love her hair. I love her look. There's a profile shot of her in that. So that's for $5. You get a download of that. So for $10, you get that as well as another art book I've done more recently, just this year, called Tone. And Tone is me discovering a sort of side style. Like Mobius will have a couple different styles, and so I'm like starting to kind of dabble in that. And so what Tone is, if I'm using Procreate, there's like screen tones you can use, and you can use them as a pen. So I started just drawing these paintings just in screen tone, and so it really looks to me almost like an 8-bit video game drawn like a Renaissance painting in a really weird way. And so again, it makes like these pop culture figures really fresh. I drawn like a Jason Voorhees, I think looks really neat in that. The Ninja Turtles. I think there's a drawing of Dune in there, and there's one from The Witcher, and there's a bunch of stuff. So these are both big, like 60-page, and I think the other one's like 40-page art books, and you get digital downloads of both of them because the physical ones have sold out.
Right.
So the lowest tier. And so the next thing is you get a digital download of the Serious Creatures graphic novel, and it's gonna be I think the final count is like 228 pages total.
Wow.
And so I think 190 of that is just the story. You get 6 covers, and also there are each issue came with the back cover is actually a movie poster for an in-universe fictional movie, and those are really fun to do. And so like on the Kickstarter poster on the page, you can see my favorite one is called Connecticut Werewolf in King Arthur's Court, which is sort of that's kind of our American Werewolf in London. But so those are included. There's some behind the scenes stuff where I show you some character sketches and some art that wasn't used that I kind of like I made a different choice. And so that's all included in this huge volume. And one of the reasons that when if you want to get the physical book, it's $25. I really wanted to get $20. It was just so many pages that I was like, it has to be 25, because $20 to me is kind of the sweet spot for most things. But for $25, you get the actual physical book. But it's going to be 228 pages. It's a big guy,
and then you also get all the digital editions of, as you say, it's that's where you get the cartoonist commentary, the bounce out still.
And actually, I have made I kind of forgot to do it, but if you buy the digital version of Serious Creatures, I'm still going to give you the cartoonist commentary because it's a digital download. It doesn't cost me anything to give it to you, and also I want to show it off. And that thing I'm still creating right now, and it's going to be a lot of pages because since it's digital, I'm not worried about putting. I can just do one image and one paragraph in each page if I want to. If I think, yeah. So it's going to be huge, and I think it's really fun because it's just fun doing like just think about the different references and the different like inspirations. I have one page, it's Jason Voorhees, there's the Shy Guys from Super Mario Brothers 2, and there's an Ever Gory picture. I'm like, this is all for one panel. This is what I was thinking of. And I was just like, I think that's kind of neat. So I want to include that. And so the tiers past the physical book, you also get a combo package where you get the Lumen graphic novel as well as Serious Creatures. And then I have 4 different tiers just for different retailers. So this is, I've been selling the individual issues in comic shops, and I want to keep doing that. And I think graphic novels, I think a lot of times for readers, for independent comics, graphic novel is a lot more appetizing because a lot of times independent comics, you don't know when the next issue is going to come out. A lot of times they're not super reliable. A graphic novel is a complete thing. At least you can go, I can trust this tells a story. And so I've had a few shops opt for it, which is great. I have 4 different options. You can buy different numbers of Serious Creatures and or Lumen, and it's all 50% off for the shop, and I'll pay for shipping. And then the big tiers, if you're gonna throw down some real cabbage, I'm gonna give you, I love doing like just ink sketches with comic books I sell, and so the lower levels of the lower levels of the higher tiers have smaller ink sketches, but then eventually it goes up to commissions. It goes up to I have tons of art here that I think is pretty good, and so I'm going to include that if you go for the higher tiers, like commissions along with some art that I'll select for you.
Well, here's the thing, Tony. You're looking at this. You pledge for $100 or more, original art commission headshot. If you go to a Comic Con, they'll charge you $100 for an art commission.
Right.
So it's almost like you're getting an art commission from an accomplished artist, and then you get the print edition of his book for free. In a way. It's like,
thank you. Yeah, that's kind of how I felt. I felt like with Kickstarter, I want to give people. It's sort of they're also giving me the faith that like they're if they don't know me, it's the first time to discover me. They're going to believe in me, so I want to give them a little extra something for doing that. For the trust. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, you got these like art commissions plus 3 more. I think. Okay. Wow.
Yeah.
This is, as I say, this is a pretty you have a pretty robust. You said you have a pretty robust level of pledges. So let me ask you this. Look at this too. It's like, you already have people are taking up your $300 one. That's amazing.
Yeah. I was like, wow, cool. That's really nice.
So where did you come up with the idea of the pledge levels?
Well, so I've been like stalking other people's Kickstarters, people I trust and people I respect. And I've also I've done a Kickstarter for Nefarious Twit. I did one I think it was 7 years ago, and I published that novel, maybe 8 years ago. And that was my only other Kickstarter, and that was successful, and it was great. But I learned that a lot of my higher tiers for that were a bunch of posters I was going to print. And I still ended up, I didn't owe money. I made money, but those, printing out posters and all this extra stuff that costs more money, it doesn't exactly, those tiers levels don't really go back into your campaign. So I realized, okay, well, I like drawing. I think that's actually the most valuable thing I can offer anyways, this is a one-of-a-kind drawing from me. Mm-hmm. It's better than a print, and it costs me less than a print to create, and it's one of a kind. So I was like, well, that makes more sense to offer that instead of additional prints or like stickers or and also for me as a consumer and a reader, when I back Kickstarters, I usually just get the book. I like comics. I don't really need much else. I like posters to a point, but I only hang a few up, so I don't need that or an action figure or a T-shirt. I just want the comics. So for me, comics and actual art from an artist is kind of my favorite thing.
Right. Yeah. And we have, and as I say, so this, and you've been selling out of these issues of Serious Creatures.
Yeah, I'm really lucky. Yeah.
And so it was your idea to kind of, all right, let's just make a trade. Basically, it's not a graphic novel; it's a trade paperback. Would probably be the better description of it.
Well, yeah, and honestly, I actually prefer trade paperback. I think graphic novel is kind of what the comic industry made to kind of entice people who look down on comics. But at the same time, if I say trade paperback, some people are like, "What's that?" I'm like, "It's a graphic novel." They go, "Oh, right."
I
So
know what that is. Yeah.
yeah, it's funny. I actually wrote an article a year ago about how I prefer trade paperback as a term, and then I did this campaign. Someone's like, "Hey, dude, you're the guy who says." I'm like, "I know. I'm trying to reach middle of America here. Come on, help me out." Um, but yeah. So basically, I've been lucky enough that the single issues sell out, and so part of the necessity of this is that I've reprinted a few of them, but after a while, it just makes more sense to collect them. And again, I think, especially for selling in shops, I know myself, I've taken chances on individual issues, but I've been burnt a few times by comics that the last two issues are super late or they don't come out. And if a trade paperback of an indie comic, at least I have enough. I know that there is an end point here. It's all here. It's kind of nice to have in your hand. So I was like, I think that would be way more enticing to people at shops when they see that.
Mm. And so I notice, compared to some of the other folks that I've talked to in the past, you can't get these on Amazon. They're not on Comixology. You have them on Etsy. So how do you get these produced?
Yeah. So I might try Comixology at some point because my novel Nefarious Twit, which I printed it through Amazon, and it's very similar. I've heard that some of the comics, some creators aren't happy with Comixology's the actual the look of the book, and so I go through a printer called Greco Printing. Their comic division's called Comixology, or not comic. It's called Comicscape. Yes, but the comics with an X. That's right. But Greco Printing, they're from Michigan, and I've worked with them for years now, and I really think they're high quality books. And when I go to shows and other creators see them, they're always like, "Hey, who printed these?" I'm like, and I tell them I'm not trying to hide any secrets or anything. And so I know it's gonna be quality product, and so that's who I've been working with now. And actually, my next project is going to be it's going to be an illustrated instructional manual for a video game that does not exist. So
Awesome.
yeah, it's gonna be really fun, and it's gonna be a weird square format. It's gonna be an extra large square format. I forget the actual inches, but it's like it's huge. But my printer, they can do it now. They bought a new machine, and I asked them, they're, you're lucky you asked now because now we can do that. So I'm really excited about that. So they're kind of game for trying new stuff. But of course, with Amazon, I Comixology on Amazon, people find it on Amazon. It's a huge place to find books. So that's why I might try it out just to see what I think of the comic quality. But I haven't taken the dip yet.
Hmm. So when you make this, so you've already been thinking about this, and I know you have an answer. So tell me if you want to. Where is this non-existent video game instruction manual? How does this fit into any Darsmanian influence or Easter eggs in there?
So what's fun is it's you're definitely right. So basically, the idea is that in the 80s, when the Nintendo boom happened, there was a Darsmanian company. And they had their own. They tried out this video game system as console called the Bounce House, and it caused some weird effects on children. And they tried out in a small area, and there's some kind of weird, maybe psychotropic effects on children. So they had to take it away from the market. But what also links to the other books is that the Bounce House. I'm sorry, the Bounce House is the name of the console, but the company is the Illusionari. The Illusionari is the name of the hotel from Augmented Fourth, and the Illusionari is named after a weird religious sect that impacts the unpublished novels of Higher Climes of Fire and the Bleeding Tree trilogy, and also they're part of the Nefarious Twit world. So this Illusionari and the Darsmanian stuff. It's right here with this new art book I'm making, and the book's gonna be called Attaboy. And Attaboy is sort of a Mega Man-esque little robot boy who it's gonna be really weird but really fun. I'm really looking forward to it. Yeah.
So there's been a few people that have. How would you describe what genre is this? I mean, the closest I can come to is heavy metal, horror, sci-fi, fantasy. Just putting all those words together.
Are you talking about the new one, the new art book?
All of it, because it's a shared universe. You have this. you know, it's
It's what's crazy is the unpublished novels. I've been calling them. It reads like Mark Twain's Dune. So it's like about a folk singer who is also a heretic terrorist fighting an evil world church, but it's also it's very it's kind of like my love letter to Bob Dylan in the Basement Tapes, and so it's really weird. Like, and so all my stuff is kind of basically, I have a lot of ideas, but I usually don't act on them until I go, I don't know what this sounds like. And then I'm like, that's interesting. And then I try it. And then I try to retroactively go, how do I tell people what this is? And I try to find keywords that kind of make some sense of it. But yeah, I like Augmented Fourth is definitely, there's heavy metal in there. And if Serious Creatures, I've been calling it a horror adjacent coming of age comedy. And so it taps into all those things. I also tell people it's kind of like if you like Goodfellas or Boogie Nights, this is that, but it's about the special effects sect. It's about these guys who make monster movies.
right.
So I don't know. It's really hard to. Yeah.
Have you ever thought about making like because the piece that's missing over these past few years is the music side of it. Have you ever thought about making concept albums for each of your genre books?
That could be awesome. Like it's funny. I've had like at least like 7 songs. I want to get at least 10 songs to make one last great rock album that I have in me before I'm like 55 or 60, and I don't want to do it. And while I can still like scream and bark, but I used to write concept albums when I was a kid when I was really bad at guitar. So now that I'm better, I should probably try it again. But it's funny. A lot of concept albums, like the big, like Quadrophenia, Pink Floyd, The Wall, Tommy, those are very inspirational to my my stories, my novels, my comics. Like
Right.
I think about those all the time, and it's really I think that's a underrated kind of form of storytelling.
Yeah. I would be great to have just like a Serious Creatures concept album, or because that's another genre of storytelling. It's
right.
Yeah.
I would super love it. It's funny. I don't know how it would sound like it, because Serious Creatures I think is the funniest thing I've written in a lot of ways.
Right.
And so I think there should. My first thought was like, oh, it's gonna be kind of glam rocky, kind of tongue in cheek, but still like rocking. Like it sounds like Sweet or something. But I'm like, I don't know.
Yeah.
In my head, the theme song to Serious Creatures is the Kinks' Celluloid Heroes. That to me is like kind of nails it, but I don't know.
Yeah. Wow. All right. Well, I just realized we went over an hour. This was This is great, Tony. So Tony, where can people find you?
Sure. Luckily, no one has a name spelled just like me for some reason. So TonyMcMillen.com. I'm there. You find me on Instagram, it says Tony McMillen. You find me on Facebook, it says Tony McMillen. And on Twitter, it's just Tony McMillen. And I guess my last name is spelled with an EN at the end, and most McMillens are AN for some reason.
Okay.
But we did the EN, and it's worked out thus far. So if you look up my name, I'll be the guy. You'll find embarrassing photos. You'll find chocolate milk recipes. You'll find me.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much, Tony. And as I say, it's congratulations on your successful Kickstarter. It's got 15 more days as of this recording. You got 15 more days to go on it. And I had a fantastic. Next time you're doing a Kickstarter, please, come on by. I'd love to have you come back on Storycomic Presents. I had a fantastic time talking to you.
Me too. This is great. It's a blast.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks, man.
It's like Gwar doing like a children's show or something.
Oh, it'd be so fun. Like Gwar lives in the neighborhood. They have their own broadcast, and like Wayne's World with like something dark, and yeah, I would totally be into that.
Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood with Gwar comes to visit. That would be
like
great.
Fake blood. Yeah. Well, especially if it was like Kiss or somebody who's kind of schlocky already. Because I like Kiss, but Kiss is like very like we're a business too, and like they're upfront with that. So that'd be kind of perfect,
That would be amazing. I think that could be something, and just combine it all together. See,
I might steal your idea. I'll give you no credit, but know that it was your idea.
That's right.